Serious people who know murderers, were there any signs that something was off? If so, what were they? Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy. Thanks. My dad would always tell me about the crazy things his work friend would say. Things like how he was going to push his wife down the stairs, or put rat poison in her food. I told my dad that these weren't normal things to say and he should contact the police or at least his HR, but he would defend it, saying that was just his sense of humor. He got arrested trying to hire a hitman to kill his wife, which ended up being a cop. He had his flaws, as everyone does, and there were a few things, like lying, that were an issue in the beginning. But he was a supportive husband and father and a great employee at a veterinary hospital for 7 years. Clients and animals loved him. When our daughter's youngest child was a few months old, he started having an affair with a coworker of his. Ultimately, it ended our marriage. She had 2 kids from her previous marriage who were very close in age to 2 of mine. Eventually my ex and this person got married and had 2 daughters of their own. 4 years ago he murdered all 5 of them, the new wife and the 4 kids. Literally no one in his life could have said they saw anything indicating he would ever do something like that. Met a family that I became really close to. We hung out a lot in AMP. I worked for him. I liked the wife and AMP kids more than the husband. He was very narcissistic in AMP, far too interested in his 13-year-old daughter's friends. He got caught cheating on his wife for the 2nd or 3rd time, and AMP, when the marriage was falling apart, described to his soon-to-be ex-wife how he could kill her and AMP make it look like an accident. Couple years later he remarried, got caught cheating by the new wife. She wasn't as forgiving as the first wife, and AMP threatened divorce before she died, exactly as he had described how he would kill his ex. The ex-wife called the police and AMP. They re-examined the accident, found the chunk of wood he hit her with before he loaded her in the car and AMP pushing it over a cliff. Serving life in prison. He died of cancer in prison in 2017. A former co-worker tried to murder his girlfriend and spent some time in prison for attempted murder. Got out, moved to Florida, and promptly murdered his new girlfriend. Dude was fucking red flags up and down. Needlessly aggressive over small matters, insanely prideful, and willing to argue about basically any disagreement. None of the women I worked with were comfortable around him, and some straight up called him dangerous and wouldn't be in the same room as him. We worked an office job and he actually thumped his chest at me with his fists, yelling about seniority. He ate some of the first girlfriend's face while stabbing her in the chest multiple times. She tried to get him to be kept in prison and to warn his new girlfriend, but he dismissed her as crazy and blowing things out of proportion. He cut the second girlfriend's throat because he thought she danced with someone else. For 4 years I worked for desks away from someone who was arrested and convicted of a 32-year-old cold case murder. Dude was an asshole but didn't give off murder vibes. The general reaction was, huh, I hope his replacement is less of a dick. I worked for a guy that went to kick the guy's ass that was molesting his daughter. The molester pulled a gun, and in the fight my old boss killed him with his own gun. My boss served 6 years in Louisiana Penitentiary. Last I saw him he had full custody of his daughter. I've posted about it before, but a kid down the street talked about killing squirrels for fun. He was 7-ish years old. He moved away, and we forgot about him. 20 years later we saw him in the news for brutally killing his parents. My former manager killed his wife and attempted to make it look like a suicide. He did this because he was ultra-religious and cheating on his wife with multiple women he found online. The church he was a member of frowned upon divorce, so he thought murder would be a better alternative. The story has been on Dateline and other shows. He was a super strange dude, and when I found out I wasn't completely surprised. His office always smelled like farts. My dad, who is elderly, goes to the coffee shop every day and has his regular coffee house friends. There was one guy, who I met a few times and my dad had coffee with often, who just seemed like a typical normal guy. In fact, my dad's dog loved this man. Not only did he end up being a murderer, it was like sick, twisted murder. My dad said he could be a little odd, but he never get creepy, weird vibes from him. Harvard, Yale combo. Loved the guy. His exam involved Hulk Hogan and AMP, the NWO, doing a hostile takeover. He used to make fun of me for smoking at the time Marlboro Lights. Real lawyers smoke Reds. A few years after I graduated, he shot an AMP, killed his autistic kid an AMP, then shot an AMP, killed himself in a police standoff. Still makes no sense. I'm not saying anyone expected this, but if his high school class had voted for most likely to bludgeon their parents to death with a baseball bat, he would have won unanimously. But if that's not clear enough, here's a reply I made, which I'm copying for visibility. It's hard to describe, maybe because people like him are thankfully rare. He was smart honors student. He wasn't a social outcast, but nobody was close to him, and nobody would have described him as a friend. I think because everyone felt there was something odd about him. When talking about him, everyone always referred to him by his first and last names, never just Alex. com/archives/laxbm 1997-deck20m and 519 story. HTML. Please note that this guy was unique enough, as humans go, that another Redditor was able to identify him after almost 30 years from a first name and vague description before I linked to the news article. When her fraternal twin sister fell in love with a good friend of mine, she became enraged with jealousy and could not let it go. Her sister begged her to get help, and there was a huge blowout in a hallway on campus where my friend had to intervene to prevent his girlfriend from getting stabbed by her sister. The police were called to campus, and she spent a week in jail before her sister decided to not press charges. Her remaining friends dropped out of her life because of her actions and unwillingness to get help. She got kicked out of college shortly after threatening the guidance counselor who was giving her one last chance and moved back in with her parents. When her sister went home for Christmas with my friend to introduce him to her parents, I told him to watch his back. They hadn't even made it all the way into the house before they were attacked and repeatedly stabbed. My friend died on the porch, and she died at the hospital the next day. The murderous sister was beaten to death in a jail fight a few days later. I met their older brother, who I didn't even know existed, at the funeral for the good sister. He said he had gone no contact with the family years before for his own protection, because his parents refused to do anything about the mental health problems that his little sister always had, even as a small child. Rip Derek. Miss you, buddy. He had a brother who was like 3 years older than us, who I remember as being generally nice. But I have one weird memory of him absolutely losing his shit when he tried to teach me and his brother to rollerblade and I couldn't get it, like throwing things and weeping uncontrollably. When I was in high school, found out that he had joined the military, and while he was deployed he got court-martialed for killing civilians and keeping body parts, fingers, ears as trophies. Then I guess 2 guys tried to break into his house in the middle of the night, and he shot them with a shotgun and killed them. And for whatever fucking reason, instead of calling the police and claiming stand your ground and protection of property, he fucking cut them up and fed them to his pigs. Got life for mutilation of a corpse and some other shit. The only thing I can find online is his appeal and his redaction of his appeal. If anyone wants to do more digging, by all means, this is all I could find with a quick search of his name. Court appeal transcripts https://case law, FindLaw. CA Court of Appeal 1,847,872. HTML. I know a guy who killed someone with a sword. A replica katana, but an actual sword. He'd always been weird and maladjusted, but never in a way that made anyone nervous that way. UK News. Liverpool News. Rasta Jack found guilty. Friends of 15,209,186. UTM_source equals WhatsApp and AMP. UTM_medium equals social and AMP. UTM_campaign equals sharebar. https://www. Liverpool UK News. Liverpool News. Rasta Jack found guilty. Friends of 15,209,186. UTM_source equals WhatsApp and AMP. UTM_medium equals social and AMP. UTM_campaign equals sharebar. A newspaper story about this guy for people wondering if it's a story they know already. My cousin had always been a spoiled jerk. When I heard that he killed someone over a video game, I wasn't surprised. My aunt and uncle always told me that it'd be nothing when I grow up, and now look at their kid. My cousin who murdered never had consequences growing up. I knew of him getting in fights and his parents being victim blamers. How could the person do this to our son kind of deal. While my family wasn't shocked, is a bit unnerving. He was out of jail by the time I was a kid. Yes, there was always something off about him. My mother told me he was always violent and had a sadistic streak. He liked to make people afraid. He mellowed out as he got older, but he was always a user and always looking to take advantage where he could. I'm pretty sure he was a sociopath. My mother had a lot of siblings, and he was the only one like this. He's doing life in prison now. I dated his twin brother and lived with them both in college. There were definitely signs. He was super into hardcore porn and would have porn watching parties in the living room. There was a rumor around school that he raped a girl and videotaped it. And he was also very touchy-feely with me and every girl I knew. He even tried to trick me into thinking he was my boyfriend once, but I could tell them apart by smell, as weird as that sounds. No, absolutely no warning at all. No hints to look back on and say we should have seen it coming. She was a perfectly average suburban wife and mother who woke up one day and snapped, and ended up being featured on Snapped. She's currently serving out a 40-year term. One was a complete surprise. He was the quiet one of 3 brothers, the other 2 of whom were far more dodgy. The other 3 were all nasty pieces of work from the beginning, and it was no surprise whatsoever they ended up where they did. Also no one more as an adult. My dad's friend seemed a placid, calm, timid bloke, but he stabbed his wife and kids to death then topped himself. Greasy, but was actually quite polite. The girl behaved like a very young teenager in general. Several weeks later, I got a call from the pediatrician taking care of the child. He told me that the baby was in the hospital with multiple fractures. My first, rather naive reaction was to assume the baby had undiagnosed osteogenesis imperfecta. The pediatrician straightened me out pretty quickly. I don't think there was anything that could have been done for the baby. Pretty sure the baby daddy was convicted. They famously killed their parents and little brother in the 90s. I met them several times beforehand. Yes, there were serious red flags. Things like being a skinhead and having the word berserker tattooed on their forehead immediately come to mind. We interacted a bunch online. He seemed okay, a little weird, but everyone was. He would take breaks and disappear from the chat for long periods and just show back up and be fine. I was about to meet him in real life, but he was arrested before that. I was shocked by the details of the case, way out of his persona online. I knew Christopher Bennett as a child. Honestly, I thought he was a bit of a jerk. Then again, most little boys are mean to little girls, especially little girls who are 3 years younger than them and seem to think they can do whatever the boys are doing. Last time I saw him, we had grown up a little. I was 11, he was about 14. He wasn't as mean as I had remembered him. Did I see it coming? No, most people didn't. I mean, he was getting into trouble a lot, but murder, never thought he had it in him. Then again, he was right to kill the bastard he did, and I think a lot of other people would become murderers if they saw what he did. In 2003, he murdered his mother's boyfriend. He was 18 at the time. He broke into his mom's house with the intention of robbing the place. What he found was his little half-sister getting sexually abused by her father, Chris' mom's boyfriend. Chris ended up with one hell of a long prison sentence, 1,500 plus years for ridding the world of a child molester. His sisters have since grown up and have been speaking out. They have been fighting to get their brother out of prison for a number of years. My then husband and I were hanging out and met up with a friend of his and the friend's girlfriend. The friend gets a call from his brother and invites him to join us. The brother arrives, and pretty soon afterwards, the whole vibe changed. My ex knew both men since all 3 were kids, so he was relaxed enough to start drinking around them. I was babysitting a wine cooler because I'm the next thing to a teetotaler and was the designated driver. I kept noticing the brother staring at me, but tried to ignore it, but it quickly became very uncomfortable. I'm nothing special to look at facially. I got the mom bod on lock and I was with my husband. The brother then asked me why I'm not drinking. I explained that I'm not a real drinker and added that I like to be aware of who and what's around me. So he asked my husband why I wasn't drinking. I don't remember his response, but dude looks at me and says we need to get you drunk. I left to go sit in the car, because WTF was that. I didn't feel safe or protected because my ex wasn't even paying attention. About 20 minutes later, dude walks up to my car and asks if I can take him to the corner store. I reminded him that he had a car, and he replied that he couldn't drive because he'd been drinking. I told him I wouldn't take him, which led to us staring at each other in silence for several moments. He broke the silence by saying, "I bet you're real loyal. A loyal girl. A good girl. I know that motherfucker get anything he want from you." Then he laughed and walked away. When I told my ex the next day, he wasn't bothered and was making excuses for the friend's brother's behavior. A few weeks later, there was a report on the news about the body of a woman being found in my ex's old neighborhood. Find out later she's been raped and murdered. It didn't take long to find and arrest her killer, aka the friend's brother. He was never violent or outright malicious, but he liked to steal things. A few years ago I found out he murdered his girlfriend's 2-year-old daughter by punching her in the stomach several times, all because she put her shoes on wrong. He got life without parole. His name is Jadon Nunes. Here's the article if you want to read it. https://kdh news. Common news/crime. Ikaleen man sentenced to life in prison for capital murder of child in Temple article _440,626 ed. 35 ed. 11 ec 9 for 5b7 f 246 d 39 b 334 html.